Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's webinar. My name is Robert Martin. I'm the National Chair of the Tenner Farm Association. I'd just like to remind everybody we are recording this live tonight, and so please put questions into the chat function at the bottom of the screen, wherever it is on your computer, and we will be able to ask these questions live to our people who have joined us this evening. So, as I said earlier, I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight's webinar, and this will allow us to have a deeper delve into the DEFRA ELMS scheme for farmers in England, specifically a deeper dive into the SFI 24 extended offer. I would like to thank our sponsors for this evening, who are Roythorns. Roythorns have kindly agreed to support all our webinars and virtual events for the next 12 months, and also the rest of our digital knowledge content. Roythorn is a national law firm steeped in agriculture. They've been in existence for 90 years, advising landowners and tenants alike. They are lawyers who are active in the farm tenancy policy groups. They also get the bigger picture. So whether it's succession application, an application for a new tenancy, Roythorns is out there to give you the best advice and to assist you. As I said earlier, tonight's webinar is being recorded, and once edited will be available on the TFA members' exclusive video on the TFA website. So if you log on to the website, it can be found under the members section. Don't forget to check out our other videos, and on our YouTube channel you can also find other teachings and helpful videos that we've done over a period of time. So just search for us under @TennantFarmers. So moving on to this evening, we will hear from Janet Hughes and Jonathan Marsden from DEFRA as we explore the additional SFI options which have been made available, and how those can knit together to work within your current farming system. Here's a little bit about our speakers. We will hear firstly from Janet. Janet is Director of the Farming Reform Programme in DEFRA. She's making farm policies and schemes work for farmers and delivering ambitious outcomes for food, farming and the environment. Janet has been in this role for 4 years, and before that she had a career in and around public sector, leading teams to get difficult things done, and that generally working with people, education, health and the government digital service and the London city government. Following Janet, we will have Jonathan Marsden. Jonathan is the head of SFI standards and the environmental land management programme within DEFRA. Jonathan is a dairy farmer based in the Peak District. The family farm is made up of a mixture of owned and tenanted land, and the land rented over numerous landlords, and the land straddles the SDA boundary. Jonathan has been involved in the delivery and the design of agri-environment schemes for the last 25 years, starting in 1996 as an advisor in the first version of the Countryside Stewardship Scheme, working on the National Peak District Park Authority. He moved into MAF in 1997 as the Countryside Stewardship Advisor, and looking at my notes here, he even processed some of his first applications, so he has a good insight. Moving on from there, in 2018, Jonathan moved to DEFRA, where he managed the simplification of Countryside Stewardship and the transition of the scheme to ELM. In 2019, he took on the current role in ELM as the head of SFI standards. And after Jonathan, we will hear briefly from our own Lynette Steele. We're very pleased to have Lynette back, especially as chairman I am. Lynette joined the TFA as the policy advisor in 2018. She has subsequently worked closely with DEFRA colleagues on the design and introduction of the Sustainable Farming Initiative and wider schemes within the Agriculture Transition Programme. She also works alongside her husband on a tenanted arable unit in Hampshire, so has the hand on the experience of farming within the new policy area. So, as I said earlier, we're also opening this evening up to questions live. So, if you can, at any point through tonight's proceedings, if you hear something that you want to get an answer to, put it into the question and answer area at the bottom of your screen. So, as I say, we will now move on to our first speaker of the evening. I'd like to welcome back Janet Hughes. I've enjoyed working with Janet over this last while I've been chair, and I'll just hand over to you, Janet, please.
Thanks very much, Robert. Lovely to be here, and lovely to welcome Lynette back and to see George as well, and to have my lovely colleague Jonathan along with me. Thank you very much, everybody, for dialing in. We will do our best to answer all your questions as best we can this evening. Could you go on to the next slide, please, Julia? Thank you. And we will work, we've got some slides to show you because we thought it might be helpful to talk through what it is that's on offer, but we won't take up a lot of time doing this. And we want to get onto your questions, so do encourage you to ask them. But before we get into the questions and answers, I'm Janet, as Robert said. I run the Farming and Countryside Programme here in DEFRA, and I work in partnership with all my colleagues in the Rural Payments Agency, Natural England, Forestry Commission, Environment Agency, and all sorts of other delivery partners, and we work really closely with Tenant Farmers Association and other bodies. And Tenant Farmers Association in particular have been very active over years, helping us to try and make sure these schemes work for tenant farmers. So I'm really keen to hear your questions this evening and feedback about how that's going. And we're always looking to learn and improve and to hear how things are going, because you, of course, farm a huge proportion of the land in this country, well over a third, or more than that if you count any farm that's got tenanted land on it. And you play a vital role in farming and food production and farming communities and rural communities, and we do really try to go out of our way to understand that, and we deeply respect it, and we deeply respect what you do. So it's really important to us to be here this evening, and we're very grateful. So thank you for having us. SFI so far. So SFI, if you're coming at this for the first time, which you may well be, this is the scheme that's designed for farmers to pay you to undertake sustainable farming techniques and to look after nature around your farm in the course of your farming. And we've designed it to be flexible, much more flexible than historic schemes, much more accessible for tenant farmers, so that you can have short contracts and you can leave if you lose land management control. You don't need landlord consent to take part for most of the actions. And then we're trying to make it flexible in terms of what you can do and what choices you can make, so you can choose what combination of actions you want to do. And we've done lots of work with farmers over years now to understand what that looks like and how to improve it. And one of the questions that's bound to come up is, why do you keep changing things? And the reason we do that is because we want to make them better. But we do realise you also want clarity and certainty, and we're always trying to try to find balance for that. So we're going to try and give you some clarity this evening in that way. So last time we checked, 81% of those who had actually applied for SFI and taken part rated it positively, and that's much better than our pilot. So things are going in a good direction there, but we know we've got work to do. We're going to chase down that 19%, and we want to keep it that high as well. And this year we've introduced a lot more actions into the scheme, and that does make it more complex in terms of deciding what it is you're going to do. So I'm sure there'll be questions coming through about that as well. We've got more than 25,000 farmers now in SFI. We've had more applications for that scheme in the last year, which is the first year that SFI 2023 has been on offer, than we've ever had for any scheme in its first year historically. Even the very popular ELS didn't have that many people coming into it in its first year. But SFI is also delivering some really important outcomes for food, to help make your farm more resilient, to reduce carbon emissions, to look after water, to look after soil, to improve biodiversity, all of which can help make food production more resilient over time. We've got roughly half of farmers are now in a scheme of one sort or another, whether it's SFI or stewardship. And the new government has said that they are committed to continuing to roll out these schemes. So I got asked a lot of questions over the last year by people saying, what if there's a change of government? Are they going to change everything? Are they going to start all over again? And the incoming ministers have been very clear publicly and privately that they do not want to overturn the apple cart. And what they've heard from everybody is these are not perfect, these things, but they are good enough to keep going, and the worst thing you can possibly do is throw it all up in the air and start again. Please don't do that. So they are not going to do that, but they do want to continue improving the schemes in an orderly way to make sure they really work for farmers and deliver those outcomes. You can apply for SFI now. You need, at the moment, you do that by telling the RPA you want to apply, and they will invite you. But that's a very straightforward process. You'll be asked a few questions to help the RPA understand what you're interested in doing and who you are, and give you the right support. And then you'll be invited to apply. We've had something like 12,000 people have expressed their interest, and of those, about 11,000 as of this afternoon had been invited. So we are working through inviting people at a pace. So if you're wanting to come in, don't hang about. Don't be put off by the expression of interest. You can get involved. Next slide. We're doing lots of things. We're seeing we've got 700,000 hectares of arable land going to be farmed without insecticides, more than 200,000 hectares of low input grassland, loads of hedgerows, lots of things really happening. And we know that it's important to you to be able to see results from this. You don't want to just do stuff for the sake of it. And one of the things that the new government has said they're going to do is publish much more information about how it's going and what we're seeing by way of results. But we are seeing some encouraging results already about in our pilots in particular in terms of increases in wildlife, improvements in soil health, etc. So we really want to encourage you to get involved, and we really want to do that by helping you understand what's on offer, for which I'm going to hand over to Jonathan. Over to you, Jonathan. You're still on mute, Jonathan.
I've been reminding myself so many times to unclick the mute button and then I forget.
There you go.
So thank you, Janet, and thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So just to carry on with the slides. So obviously we launched SFI in its new variant last year with 23 actions. In May this year, we've expanded that offer significantly, and there are now 101 unendorsed actions, i.e. normal SFI actions. We also released the updated scheme information, which includes things regarding what the checks tenants need to just undertake, and also we revised the T's and C's. And on the .gov website, and there's a little illustration there, you can search using what we call the Find tool to find out the details of all of those actions. If we can move to the next slide, please. So, summary of the changes. We've updated T's and C's in relation to upgrades. We've updated versions of the 101 actions. So there are a few tweaks that we've made to some of the existing actions. And obviously we have rolled into SFI now all the actions that were available in the mid-tier. We have got our first endorsed action, and we'll say a little bit later about what we mean by an endorsed action, which is for species-rich grasslands, particularly priority habitat species-rich grasslands. And within the information that's available on the .gov website, as well as the details of what you must and mustn't do, there's also details on the same web pages regarding the voluntary advice, the things that can help you deliver the great outcomes. We've released information regarding those endorsed actions, and for the first time in SFI, a range of supplements. Next slide, please. So some key aspects of SFI for those of you that are new to this. First of all, there is no application window. The application window is open all the time. You apply at a time of the year that it is convenient for you to do so, and your agreement will start the following month once you've accepted your agreement, the offer of your agreement. It's universal access, so every type of landowner is eligible now. We've removed the link to BPS, so the 5 hectare constraint has gone. And we've, as Janet's mentioned, we've endeavoured to make the scheme as flexible as possible in terms of you've got the free choice of which of those over 100 actions you want to do, how much of them you want to do them, where you want to do them. We've built in flexibility into the actions. So we've tried to limit the number, the things that you must not do or you must, to give flexibility to make the actions work for you in your particular circumstances. We're allowing combinations of actions to happen on the same place at the same time, where those actions complement each other and there's no double funding. And we've done a lot of work to make the scheme more accessible to tenants. As Janet said, there's no need for landlord's consent, and there are shorter agreements, and we've got flexibility where people are on roll in FBTs. It's a far quicker process for getting an agreement. So with SFI 23, the amount of time between submitting your application and getting your agreement was measured in days, rather than the months it was with mid-tier and higher tier. Payments are made automatically on a quarterly basis. And in addition to the payments you get for undertaking the actions, there's an additional management payment available on the first 50 hectares to encourage and support those smaller farms to come into the scheme. And there's an additional payment again for common land to allow and facilitate groups of commoners to come together so that they can enter a joint application. Next slide, please. So eligibility, as I've mentioned, no requirement for BPS anymore. That's gone. So it's open to new entrants, smallholders, and non-farming land managers. You must have management control of the land for 3 years. If, as I've said, if you're on a rolling FBT, as long as you've got a reasonable expectation that you're going to have control for the next 3 years, then you can bring that land into the scheme. Obviously, the actions that you choose, you must have the land and features to be eligible and the capability to undertake those actions. So, and also the land parcel has got to be entirely in England. We know we've got, this is literally a handful of parcels that straddle boundaries between Scotland and Wales separately. And you can find out more information about all those actions on the Find tool. Next slide, please. So the expanded offer, 102 actions now, including the endorsed one. All the actions that were previously available in SFI 23 are there. We have made some updates to some of those. In addition to those, we've got 23 brand new actions for things like agroforestry, no-till, precision farming, summer and spring cover crops. And the bulk of the offer, or the new element of the offer, are 57 actions that were previously available in mid-tier, which we've now rolled into SFI, but we have updated those so there's greater flexibility and less prescription. What's still to come is the details of the educational access offer, which we're wanting to make available on a wide scale. And also, we've got the one endorsed action at the moment. We're looking to add to that suite of endorsed actions later this winter. Next slide, please. So just unpacking some of that, what does this offer look like now? So agroforestry, we've 2 actions available in SFI there. The difference between the 2 offers is the number of trees per hectare. So the greater the number of trees per hectare, the higher the payment rate. There will be further agroforestry actions available in higher tier when we release details of that at greater densities. And agroforestry is just a question of, rather than having a very clear delineation between farmland and woodland, what we're trying to do now is bring trees into that farmed land. So in addition to having the trees, you are farming as normal in and around those trees. We've got all boundary features, types of boundary are now covered in the offer. Previously it was just hedgerows. Now we've got offers regarding dry stone walls, hedge banks, etc., etc. We've got a larger suite of actions available regarding buffer strips. In addition to the basic grass buffer strips, there's a wider range available. The arable farmland wildlife on arable and horticultural land, and similar for grassland. This is where the bulk of those actions that have been available in mid-tier for a number of years have been rolled into that. So things like bumble-bird mix, etc., etc. With a range of heritage actions, so for protecting historic features, again, stuff that we've rolled in from mid-tier. Integrated pest management is the offer as it was before, so that they integrate the IPM plan, pollen and nectar strips to include predatory insects, etc. We've made a big change regarding moorland. So for SFI, historically, we've just had the moorland assessment as a sort of starting point. We've now got a range of moorland actions available in SFI that all relate to the grazing. So there's different levels of stocking rate available to choose from. And as those stocking rates change, so do the payment rates change. There's also payments for shepherding and temporary livestock removal, and payments for grazing with ponies and cattle rather than sheep, and also payments for native breeds. The nutrient management offer is as it was before, so legumes in grassland, legume fallows, nutrient management plans. The organic farming is as it was in mid-tier. We have just rolled that forward into SFI. So the offer, if you're organic already or interested in becoming organic, the offer is unchanged. Precision farming is new area for us, brand new area. So these are payments for actions there that relate to the precision application of crop nutrients, targeted spraying of herbicides, sort of camera guided or remote sensing guided targeting of the herbicide sprays, and 2 actions really aimed at the more specialist crops relating to using mechanical weeders to weed between plants in rows. So we're really targeting sort of row crop stuff here, and also non-mechanical weeding, so latest technology in terms of lasers and things like that. Species recovery and management is on the way. Soil health and expansion in the offer in soil health. So as well as winter cover crops, soil health plans, testing for soil organic matter, we've now got no-till as an action that we pay for. And we've also got, to complement the winter cover crops, we've also got spring cover crops and summer cover crops, your classic catch crop between harvest and planting. And then finally, an offer regarding water bodies, payments for ponds, lakes, etc. Next slide, please. So just regarding the uplands, as I've said, we've substantially increased the offer regarding the uplands. Below the moorland line, the full range of actions is available. There's no barriers regarding if you're an upland farm, you can only do X. Obviously, all the normal eligibility applies. So to do with the arable actions, you've got to have some arable land, for example. And then above the moorland line, as I've said, we've got a far more offer regarding grazing of moorlands. And again, we've got the payments for the dry stone walls, the ditches, the native breeds, etc., etc. Next slide, please. So different types of actions. I'll perhaps take this slide a little bit slower just because to sort of avoid any confusion. So unendorsed actions are, another way of putting this would be normal SFI actions. You choose what you want to do, where you want to do it, how much of it you want to do. The endorsed actions, and we've only got one at the moment, but we will be adding to these later this year. So the endorsed action for species-rich grassland is, it's a standard action, so there's no changes to the action on a case-by-case basis, which there would be with higher tier. But to use that action in the agreement, it needs to be approved by one of our arm's length bodies or somebody acting on their behalf. And this is where we know to be effective, the action has got to be done in a particular circumstance, in a particular situation. It wouldn't deliver the aims or offer us value for money if it was just widely available. And it's where so those actions, as I say, we just need to control a little bit more closely. If we get, and I can answer a question about how that works in practice if we've time later on. We've then got a group of actions we introduced called limited area actions. So we introduced this control back in March, where we've got some actions that take land out of production. And we had a small number of customers that were putting very large areas of their farms into those actions. That not only posed a risk to food production and our objective there, but also it put tenants at risk, where landlords potentially put the whole farm into, for example, wild birdseed mix. And so we've introduced controls to stop that happening. So there's a group of actions, and we have a slide in a moment that lists them, where the total area of those actions can't be greater than 25% of the farm. Rotational actions are actions which can move each year, and there's some, so move around the farm to reflect the crop rotation. And there's also some flexibility built into those rotational actions about the area they need to cover. You've always got to deliver at least half the area that was in your first year, but there's no upper limit. And the static actions are those that for the duration of the agreement, the action has got to stop on that parcel of land. So an example of that would be low, no input grassland. And then finally on this slide, we've got, for the first time in SFI, supplementary actions. So these are where, for example, we've got payments for haymaking now, haymaking supplements, but you can only have that supplement if, for example, you've got that same parcel of land in low, no input grassland. Next slide, please. So I mentioned about the 25% limited area actions. They're shown on the screen there. As I say, they are mainly, not all, but mainly arable actions which take land out of production. They deliver the best environmental output if we've got relatively small areas of those, but dotted around the holding. Next slide, please. So additional payments, I touched on this a little bit earlier. So in addition to the payments that you get for undertaking the actions, we've got the management payment, which is paid on the first 50 hectares of your agreement, and it's paid, and in the first year, that is paid at £40 per hectare. And then for the subsequent 2 years of your agreement, it drops to £20 per hectare. And then, as again, I mentioned earlier, the payment for common land. This is where we've got groups of farmers that need to come together to put an application in. So it's not just common land, it's also with shared grazing, instances of shared grazing, and there's an extra payment available there of £7 per hectare to help facilitate those agreements. Next slide, please. So getting paid. The payments that are published on the website are an annual payment. That's the amount you'll get per year, but we pay that in quarterly instalments. The first payment usually made in month 4, and those payments are automatic. You don't need to submit a claim for those, but at the end of each agreement year, you do need to submit your annual declaration. Next slide, please. So applying for SFI, applications are made online, and the application window is currently open for the expanded offer, but we are rolling that out in a controlled way at the moment, which is why, as Janet mentioned, we've got expressions of interest, and that's just allowing us to make sure the IT and everything is working as it should. The AOI, as Janet has mentioned, it's very short and simple. We're just gathering some information that helps RPA understand the customers so we can invite them in the right group, and you will be invited into apply, and we'll be confirming details of when we move away from that, and it's open to everybody in due course. Next slide, please. So applying if you've got other schemes. So you can have an SFI running alongside and on top of the other schemes where the land is eligible for both, the activities are compatible, and we're not paying you to do the same thing twice. And the IT is built in such a way that it will stop you applying for things you shouldn't do, or if you've already got, for example, low input grassland on a parcel, through your mid-tier agreement, for example, it won't allow you to stack that same action on the same piece of land. And I think I'm finished.
Well, that's a brilliant run through there, Jonathan, and it'll maybe answer a few questions, or it'll maybe raise a few questions. So let's wait and see. I know we've got a lot coming in on the live chat already. But before we get to the question answers, I'll just hand over to Lynette at this point so she can kind of give an insight as to how the TFA is assisting its members' queries.
Thank you very much, Robert. It's lovely to be back with Jonathan and Janet and talking to everybody about SFI since I've had a short 9 months off. Certainly, the scheme is more complex this year. You don't need me to tell you that. With more actions, there's more layers, and there's far more for everybody to consider. That's whether you're going into the scheme for the first time, you're coming from a legacy scheme like ELS or HLS or countryside stewardship, or whether you're already in an SFI agreement. I suppose it's just a matter of taking it all in at the moment and working out what's going to work for your business. And I can't stress this enough. It's what's going to work for your business, not for your neighbours, not for somebody down the road, how it's going to fit into your specific circumstances. And really, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to talk through these options with members when maybe they just need a sounding board, and to help you through the applications and annual declarations when you get there, and tweaks that you might want to make to those agreements. But more importantly, and my job is made far easier by members picking up the phone and letting me know maybe what's gone right, what's gone wrong, where they're having issues. Because when I go to meetings with Jonathan and Janet and other colleagues within DEFRA and the RPA, I can feed back the issues members are having, and we can really get those stamped out and sorted. So I would encourage everybody to pick up the phone, send me an email, or just call for a chat at some point, and let me know how they're getting on, or maybe how they're not getting on, if that's the case. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Thank you for that, Lynette. It gives people an insight of what we're doing as an organisation to help them navigate themselves through the new scheme. So if I can ask Janet and Jonathan to come back online again, please, and we can kind of delve back into the questions that have come in as we've been talking, and also the questions that have come in ahead of the event. And I think probably the first point is, and it's quite relevant at the moment with us all waiting to see what's going to happen with the budget at the end of October. And this was 2 or 3 questions have come in the upcoming budget in October. Which areas of money allocated to DEFRA do the speakers believe will be affected?
I'm glad you've asked this question, because I know there's a lot of worry about this and a lot of speculation about it. The answer to that question is I will know at the end of October, because that's when the decisions will be made. So there haven't been decisions made yet about what the budget will be for the programme beyond this year. We're going through the process now within government where everybody says what money they think they need, and then the Treasury work out what they're going to do about that, and then we get notified not very long before you do, if not at the same time, in terms of exactly how much money we're going to get. And ministers are very engaged in that conversation. I can tell you that ministers have said publicly they are backing Farmers Corner, and they're fighting Farmers Corner, and they're wanting to secure money for these schemes, and they do want to carry on rolling them out. They are very clear that they're committed to the environmental land management schemes and rolling them out. And you can see that from the fact that they've carried on doing that whilst we've been in this period immediately following the government. And that's not the case for lots of other things around that you could look at around government. So we have carried on rolling out SFI, and that's because they're serious about that. So I don't know what the budget's going to be, and I therefore don't know what decisions will be made as a result of that. However, I am confident that ministers are very much putting forward that argument. They've said that publicly, and then we'll see when we get there what the settlement actually is, and obviously we'll share that with everybody. Meanwhile, if you've got a contract, then you've got a contract. So if you're wanting to get into schemes, then do that. And there is a question that was asked, which I answered online as well, which was related, but Robert, which I'll cover if I may while we're at it, which is the reason why we're not issuing very many SFI agreements at the moment. Is that because because of worries about the budget? And that's not the case. When we roll out an expanded offer or a new offer, we do it in a controlled way initially. And we've added a lot of actions. We've basically merged mid-tier into SFI this year because lots of farmers said, could you stop having quite so many different blooming schemes, please? And also from a tenant perspective, can we make more actions available for 3 years and on these flexible SFI terms? So that's a big step forward, we hope, for tenant farmers. But it is a big expansion of the offer. And when we do that, we control it much more closely for the first period of time, and we check every single agreement. We've got a whole list of checks we do, and RPA check every single one very thoroughly, just to make absolutely certain that everything's working as it should. And we always find some adjustments that need to be made for some particular situation that we haven't quite catered for or whatever. We make adjustments and then we carry on rolling it out, and that's what we've been doing. And we're now nearly ready to start standing those checks down. So we'll be starting to go faster over the next period. We've had about 12,000 expressions of interest. We've issued about 11,000 invitations. We've had about 3,000 applications submitted, and RPA have issued somewhere in the region of 700 to 800 agreements. So they are going out the door, and they are starting to go faster now, and that will speed up over the next few weeks. And it's not related to we're not holding back on them for money reasons. That's not connected.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Well, I suppose following on from that, actually, there's another question that's come in. Can we guarantee the offer to transfer countryside chiefly into new SFI on 1st of January 25 will remain after the effort to apply for SFI now rather than wait?
Sorry, Robert, you cut out briefly then, but I think you're saying can people transfer it from a stewardship agreement ending at the end of December into SFI from the beginning of January if they apply now? Yes, you can do that. Correct. Yes, you can.
You can do that.
Yes. And if you have anything like that where it's not working like you're expecting it to, or you're wanting to do something and you're not quite sure, just do contact the RPA, but you should be able to go on and be able to apply before your agreement expires so that you can then carry on from the beginning of January.
Okay, well
it might not be immediately. It might be that you need to do it within a certain period before your agreement expires. So if you contact RPA, they might say to you, don't do it just yet, do it X number of weeks before. I think it might be 4 or 6, I can't remember off the top of my head. So that's why I'm saying contact RPA. Sorry, Lynette, were you going to
say, Mr. Chairman, would I be able to jump in here and ask another question, but very much related, about HLS legacy schemes and how they are going to move into new SFI agreements, please, Janet?
Yes, so this is really, really important because we know we've got several thousand farmers still in HLS agreements, some of them on commons, some of them tenants, some of them all sorts of different arrangements, and those are people who've been doing things for a very long time under these agreements, and they're very important to us. And until last year, the general feeling among people in HLS was that they were actually quite happy where they were and were wanting to kind of stay there and then transfer later. As we've moved into this year, we've got the expanded offer. We increased prices in January in the new schemes. We've got more things on offer on more flexible terms. We're finding more people in HLS wanting to move. You can do that. It's in the rules that you can do that at the moment into SFI. At the moment, it's not a very nice process. It's very bureaucratic doing that at the moment. What we're working on is putting in place a more automated, straightforward process. So you can just press a button online and move. That's not going to be ready until we get into next year, though. So if you're wanting to move more quickly, contact the RPA. If you've got an agreement in HLS that's expiring shortly or kind of within the next few months, RPA will be in touch with you within the next few weeks to tell you what your options are. If you're wanting to go into higher tier, then higher tier, because I'm sure this will come up and we've covered it briefly in the intro, we've got an expanded higher tier offer as well. And we're looking to improve that process and get more people into higher tier. And that will be some of the people who want to come out of HLS who want to go that direction. We said we would publish the information about that in the summer, and we haven't done that. And I'm very sorry about that. That's because we weren't quite ready to publish it. And also we were interrupted by having an election and a spending review to operate. But I know that's very, very difficult for people who are waiting for that information. We do know that, and we appreciate it. And we are sorry to keep you waiting. We will get that information out within the next couple of months is the plan. And then we'll start taking applications as soon as we can in 2025. And we will be publishing more information about the timescales for that as well when we publish more detailed scheme information. So if you're in HLS and you want to move in that direction, then that will be the way for you to go there. But if you've got an agreement that's expiring imminently, RPA will be in touch with you anyway to talk about your options.
Well, I think it's a good answer, John, because that's probably one of the biggest questions we get asked all the time, because it's been a huge swathe of the land and that. I suppose it's a very wet night in Cumbria tonight, so here's a very interesting question. Before the general election, the previous government announced an expansion of the Farm Recovery Fund following the flooding experience early in the year. but not a penny has been issued. What progress has been made in getting this over the line so that some of the monies arrive on farmer bank accounts soon?
Yeah, I really, again, really appreciate the urgency and the time sensitivity of that. What's got to happen when there's an election is that things have to go through approvals again, because there's a different government and they might want to make different decisions. I'm not expecting them to on this particular issue, and it is progressing through the approvals again. I was just in a meeting about it earlier today, actually, funnily enough, on that very topic, with a number of senior people working together to get that moving and get the money out. We will make announcements about that in due course to confirm what it is exactly that's happening. But it's going through. I'm afraid there is a process after an election where you do have to go through background through approvals again, which is what's been happening. But ministers have said they're committed to this, and we are working through that and we will confirm as soon as we can what's happening next on it.
Right, okay. We've got another question here. It's to do with adding and removing options, and it kind of ties in with another question of why can't heritage environmental stewardship agreement holders transfer SFI to contract stewardship as they were told would be possible?
So yeah, in terms of transfer, that was the issue we were just talking about. In terms of if you want to move from one scheme to the other, there is also a question if you're in HLS about the difficulty of adding SFI actions onto your HLS agreement. And we basically aren't really able to do that very much because of the way HLS agreements work, because the whole farm agreement, so we can't tell what you've got where. We can't therefore tell what else you could put on that same land, because we can't, it's just too complicated, and we don't know what's going on the land. So we can't. There is a bit of stacking of SFI on top of HLS that you can do, but really, if you want to do the stuff at SFI, the thing to do is probably move across and do that as and when the more automated approach to that is available. And we will obviously do some communications about that as soon as that's available next year. If you're, like I said, though, if you're in the position where you're either expiring imminently or you really want to move before then, contact the RPA and they'll be able to let you know what to do.
Okay, I suppose following on from that, actually, regarding ELS, HLS, is it correct that no penalties will be applied if agreement holders transfer out of an existing agreement early now?
Yes. So let me just qualify that, which is, so yes, if you choose, you can choose when to leave. If you leave on an anniversary, then you get paid up to that anniversary. So you get paid for that year that you've just done, but you obviously don't get paid beyond that. If you want to leave when it's not an anniversary, and you leave in the middle of the year, then we're not going to pay you for 4 months and 23 days of activity when we don't know what activity you do in different bits of the year. So you then are forfeiting part of your year, because we don't do part year payments for schemes. So you can decide either stay put until an anniversary and get all the money from that scheme and then move, or move in the middle of a year if you really want to for some reason, and that's better for you. But we don't then do a part year payment. So that's kind of up to you to make that decision. But you're not paying penalties for coming out of it early if you're going into another scheme in that way.
Okay. We've already touched in Jonathan's presentation tonight about the certain elements of being capped at a percentage of the farm, because it was something the TFA had raised, that we didn't want land coming out of the tender sectors used to be transferred or into a scheme by the landowner. But something came up this afternoon, a question was asked of do our speakers tonight have any ideas how we stop or reduce the amount of land moving out of contract farming agreements and into SFI options? Now, I hadn't really kind of thought of this one, but this particular member says he's going to see a drop from 1,500 acres down to 750 next year that he's going to contract farm. And another member had said we're losing 2/3 of the land that we contract farm. So is there a way in which that can be stopped or can be reduced?
I think so. We've had a sort of similar question, haven't we, Jonathan? I'm going to invite you to come in as well about kind of changes to land management and the impacts on tenants. And Jonathan, you mentioned earlier that we've put limits on certain actions where it's not useful to put the whole farm into that action, and that was going to put tenants under threat. And the same would apply for contractors, I'd imagine. But I think it is a sort of slightly different situation with contractors, because you're less in a position where you're sort of, it's a different power dynamic, isn't it? It's a different sort of situation. Yeah. You don't live on the land. It's not your entire family and livelihood that we're trying to sort of preserve and protect. So I think contracting is by its nature a more sort of dynamic thing. And I think we will see some changes to contract farmers doing some of the things that are needed for schemes as well, won't we? And so it's not about just carrying on doing the same contracting, but doing other stuff as well. Jonathan, did you want to come in on that one as well?
I was just going to add, Janet, I think actually the changes that we brought in March, where we were capping the area of those actions, I think that will go a long way towards solving the issue for people on contract farming agreements,
Okay.
as well as the tenanted sector. There isn't an ideal answer, and we're doing our best to try and put in place a scheme and a set of structures that protect people where they need to be protected, but also allow some dynamism, if that's a word. And as Janet said, these actions, whether you're growing winter bird food or pollen and nectar mix, in many ways, you're just growing a different type of crop. They still need to be undertaken. They need to be managed.
No, I understand that, but I suppose these guys are saying, well, we've been growing wheat or barley, whatever it is, and now we may be, as the contractor, may be establishing it for the landowner, but we will not see the benefit of that for possibly 2, 3, 4 years. And the illustration that was given to me this afternoon, mine's a dairy background. I'm not an arable entrepreneur or expert, but they were saying they took hold of this land originally because it was coming out of being doing absolutely nothing for a lot of years, and nobody knew what to do with the land. So they took them a long time to bring it out of what it had been into, and I think I feel a little bit let down that the contracts are now given up, so supposedly an easier option for the landowner.
Sorry, go on, Jonathan.
I was going to say, it's difficult to comment on an individual case.
No, this was general, really. Yeah. If you're a landowner and somebody's been contracting a certain block of land for you, and think, well, to be honest with you, I'd rather just put it into a scheme. We might have been sharing the profit with the contract. We won't have to do that.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of the dynamics there, actually.
Yeah, and it's one we should definitely keep an eye on, and we do closely evaluate. So we look at, in our evaluations, we look at what environmental impact are we having, but we also look at what's going on in this sector. Yeah. We've published lots of data about what's happening in this sector. It's more difficult to tell what's happening with contracting and tenancies because, as we know, lots of arrangements are informal. It's not transparent to us, but that's where we rely really heavily on our relationship with you and other organisations who tell us about issues like this. So it was tenant farmers who first flagged to us the potential for farms to be taken out of production in a way that's not useful for the environment, and it could be damaging to tenants and food production. And we shared information and insight about that. And then the government decided to take action. So we really rely on insight from all of you to help us understand what's happening there. And that's one we will keep an eye on that. And ministers are really keen to keep an eye on all of this because they've said they want these schemes to work for farmers and for food production and for nature. And that means we've got to keep an eye on all these things and keep seeing whether we need to make further adjustments to keep it working properly for everyone.
Well, that's good to hear because next year one of my webinars is going to be a contract farmer and also an accountant who helps us set up contract farming agreements. So we will also be able to feedback on that.
Brilliant.
Because we've got to keep moving on this. As you say, It's very dynamic, it's changing very quickly, and the people that are managing the farm or tending the farm have got to move just as fast as that.
That's right.
I was told by an old tenant farmer a long time ago that the tenant farmer has sat half an hour faster than the owner occupier because his bed that night and his business all depend upon it.
Yeah.
And it is true today as it was back then also.
Yeah,
it's an interesting one. We've had a couple of questions in here, and this is to do with the option AHW9, which is the unharvested cereal headland, which I hadn't a clue was an issue. And the question is, can it be used on a field basis or just part of the field?
So that's an action that, well, I suppose the clue's in the title. It's designed for the edges, the headlands of fields.
Yeah.
It's designed to operate in strips or in blocks. It's not designed to cover the whole of a parcel. We haven't put a limit on it in terms of 20% of the parcel or 30% of the parcel, because every situation is different, and it just becomes a check that somebody then needs to undertake. But it is an action that is designed to operate in small blocks or strips on part of a parcel.
Oh, well, thanks for the clarification on that, because it's these are the kind of questions that comes into Lynette and the rest of the team, and I think it's good when we have you guys on that we can kind of get the answers to these questions. And I think moving on from that also, are we expecting to see any new schemes for productivity and infrastructure such as slurry stores?
So that's one of the things that ministers have got to work through and decide. And what we're going to do is announce in the autumn, after the spending review, what all the plans are for the future set of grants, and that includes slurry grants, innovation grants, and productivity grants. There's lots of people who've already got grants awarded to them, and we got claims coming in against those. But as to what the new government wants to do in terms of what rounds they're going to have, we'll publish that. And it's worth saying, by the way, whilst I'm on that topic, then one of the other things that our new ministers have heard a lot from farmers that they've been talking to, and from farming organisations like TFA, is farmers need more advance notice of what's going on here, and more simplicity around grants, so we don't have multiple different funds with loads of different things in them. So one of the things that ministers are looking to do is provide much longer term forward look about what's coming for everybody, so that you're not waiting each year to go, oh, what the hell's going on this year, and you're not having to follow all the different closing dates for lots of different things. You've got much more clarity. So that's one of the things we're working on with them. What we'll probably do is publish information before the end of this year about what's coming over the next year, and then as we get into next spring, we'll be looking to publish much longer term plans that tell you what's happening over the 5, 10, 15, 25 years and how we see that developing. And what they want to do is develop those longer term plans really in partnership with the sector. And they really are serious about that. So anything we've done so far about engagement is going to look like a drop in the ocean compared to what they want to do next, because they really want to develop a shared plan and a shared roadmap that everybody can see, everybody can plan ahead, and we can all sort of manage it together. So you'll be hearing more about that as we get towards the end of this year and into next year, and be able to see much further ahead. But I appreciate at the moment that we got a particular moment of uncertainty because we've got the new government, we've got the spending review, and we haven't yet been able to get all this information out. And we do really recognise the need to do that, and we're working hard to get out as much clarity and information as we can within this year, so that you can all see what's coming next. The good news is we are carrying on broadly with what we've been doing. So this is not a sort of, although there is a period of not having absolute clarity about exactly what's happening, we are carrying on rolling out the schemes and having grants and all that kind of stuff. And so this is about the specific details being clarified rather than the whole thing being up in the air. And it's really important to be clear about that, I think.
The long-term assessment going forward is that we do need the ability to plan. And this is one thing I was very fortunate last week to meet the Secretary of State along with George Dunn. And he kind of, I think when I spoke with you, Janet, as well, looking at a 5-year plan going forward, then in blocks of 5 going forwards, so that people can plan their businesses going forwards. And then that was the message from the Secretary of State last week, along with other things that we raised with him. And we mentioned there about the difficulty, and the question here that's come in, the SFI 24 is a more complicated than 23, which we've discussed, and taking get your head around, and how long will continue to receive support from the Farming the Future Resilient Fund. And I'll finish my question before I come in. This is how it feels like when we're trying to put the scheme together, we need to employ agents to help us, and the various amendments and rules. It's just trying to understand the complexity that the people are finding.
Yeah, so this is part of our quest, as we like to call it, which is we want to give you something that is as straightforward as possible, whilst also being as flexible as possible and giving you a large range of options. And that is quite a difficult balance to strike. So with the 2022 SFI offer, it was very simple. There were just 3 standards and you could pick one of them. The problem with that was it was very restrictive. And so it was easy to pick one of 3 things, but people didn't like it because those 3 things contained a lot of different actions, and they were quite prescriptive in terms of saying, oh, do X% of this and Y% of that. So in some ways that's more simple because there's fewer choices. But when you come to apply it on the farm, it doesn't work for you. It's much more complicated, and we didn't see people taking that up in the right numbers. What we're now offering is a range of actions, and you can pick a mix. And one of the bits of complexity last year was that we had countryside stewardship, mid-tier and SFI running in parallel, some of the same actions in different schemes, people having to manage multiple agreements. That was complicated. What we've now done is to merge them together. But that means we've now got a lot of actions in there. And if you don't already know what it is you want to do, it makes it really complicated and people worry about getting it wrong and not quite sure what to do. So what we want to do about that is we've got some leaflets and some information which we're starting to test now, which is sort of if you're an upland farmer, here's a starter package of things that other people like you will tend to do, and we're going to test that and see how useful people find that. And if they do find it useful, what we want to do is build that into the service, so that when you where we want to get to is when you log on, you'll only see things that are relevant to you. It'll be obvious to you what sort of things are the main strict things to do, and which things are a bit niche or which things are a bit more difficult, and it's much more straightforward to choose. And we know that we know that more people are having to pay agents to come into SFI this year round because they're having to get people to advise them what to do. We think it's all right to pay for advice on what you should do on your farm, but we don't want people to be having to pay for advice on just how to navigate the process. That's a complete waste of money. We don't want that. So we're constantly looking at how we can improve it. And if anybody is really excited about this and passionate about making it better, join our co-design panel, get in touch with us, and you can help us make it better. We're always looking for farmers to test stuff for us because we're always trying better ways to do this kind of thing. And what we're doing at the moment is putting in place a whole new service for another year or two's time when we run out of the contract with the existing underlying technology, and we're doing lots of testing with farmers on that. So anybody who wants to help us make it better and tell us what they reckon would make it better, please get involved. Meanwhile, we are paying a management payment in SFI for this reason. Because there are costs involved in looking after your agreement, working out what to do, making decisions about it, keeping an eye on it. And in your first year of your agreement, you get £40 a hectare for just being in the scheme, and then after that you get £20 a hectare. So there is money in the scheme to cover some of the cost of this that you get once you get into the scheme, and you do start getting paid after the first quarter. So that's partly to recognise these costs. But what we really want to do is design out as much of that as possible so you can do it yourself. And we know we're not there yet, but we have taken some strides. We've made it more flexible. We've merged mid-tier and SFI together. The next frontier is to kind of stabilise that and make it easier to work out what you want to do and to find what you're looking for.
I suppose following on from that one, and this is something we discussed the other day, Janet, that you're running more than one computer system at the moment as well. And the way the programs are. So is there a timescale of when you're hopefully trying to get everything all into one for ease of use?
Yeah, so we think most people would rather have one agreement and be able to add things to it and take it away over time. Not everybody would like to do that, particularly sometimes a tenant has one agreement and a landlord has another for different bits of the farm. And we want to be able to allow people to do that if they want. But at the moment, you are probably in a bit of a muddle if you've got a CS mid-tier agreement and an SFI 23 agreement, and then you want to do some more stuff, you need another agreement, and that's a pain for people, and most people don't want to do that. So we're working on how to do that. That's most likely not going to come in for at least another year, because at the moment, our main priorities are getting the SFI 24 offer at scale and getting those applications and turn around more quickly, and then getting the higher tier offer available and allowing people to move between the schemes. Next up after that is these sorts of improvements and simplifications and ongoing kind of making it easier for everybody. But at the moment, the big stuff that we've got to get done is get the higher tier offer out, get the SFI 24 applications out quickly, and allow people to move between schemes. Those are our next big priorities. But we will come after that to improving the service and making it smoother and easier for people, including getting to the position where you can just have one agreement and merge them together.
Well, that's very good to hear. And you mentioned there about landlords and tenants having different agreements on different blocks. Question here, just come in here, say, if farmers are tenants of an organisation initiating a nature recovery scheme, would the owner of the land have the right to terminate the tenancy if the farmers didn't want to join their scheme?
Do you want me to pick that one up, Jonathan?
Yeah, that'll be great. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah. So there are checks and balances within that process for assessing LR bids. And they're very stringent in that everybody that is involved in the management of the land needs to be involved in the development of those offers, both as those proposals are pulled together and before we move to implementation stage. So there are quite strict requirements regarding all of that, which are there to protect the tenanted sector.
And Robert, actually, that's we've recently raised this issue as well with Janet and her team, and we're working with them on reviewing the landscape recovery bids. And just last week we did, hopefully everybody saw it in the e-newsletter, we are looking for maybe tenants who have been part of a landscape recovery bid, to give us a call, let us know what their experiences are, so we can feed that back to DEFRA, because you're currently reviewing it and we're assisting them with that. So I'm very keen to hear from anybody that is maybe concerned that tenants aren't being protected through the scheme.
Please do that. Please do come through TFA. But also, if you are involved in a specific project and you've got concerns about it, then do contact, whether it's Natural England or EA or DEFRA, to let us know about it, because we do have, as Jonathan says, we have processes in place around this. But if you think it's not working for you, then we need to know. So tell us. And I am aware that there are concerns around the country in different places from people, and we're really keen to explore this in partnership with Tenant Farmers Association and others, to see, is there anything we need to do to make sure that this is working as we intend it to do, which is we want landlords and tenants to be able to participate in a kind of mutually beneficial way in these longer term schemes. And in some situations that can be a really beneficial thing for everybody. And we're really pleased to see there are lots of tenants involved in landscape recovery projects, but we really have to make sure they're working properly and that we're seeing how it's really working on the ground, not just what it looks like from where we're sitting. So that work Lynette described is really, really important. And that's the sort of thing we can do together. We've done lots of that, haven't we, Lynette, over the years? They've just kind of, we think we've got an issue here, let's both investigate it and see what we can bring together and then do something about it. And I'd like to think we've got a track record now of doing that seriously and actually acting on it when we find issues as well, and we are serious about doing that. So you'll not be wasting your time if you let us know about stuff.
Well, that's good, and every time we have a very popular webinar, I'm always acutely aware of my clock here as well. But I think we'll come on to our last couple of questions for tonight, if we can, please. We have a current mid-tier plus SFI, but if we want Herbal Lake, etc., at the moment, can we come out of both and have a new SFI to gain all the updated offers to start January 25?
So I think Janet's made reference to the fact at the moment that in terms of coming out of existing agreements to sync them up and start again afresh, we have a process in place at the moment to do that. It's quite clunky. You need to contact the RPA.
That's fine.
What we're trying to put in place in the not too distant future is a far more automated, slicker process.
No, well, that sounds spot on, does that actually? And these are the questions that are coming in all the time. You get them in, we get them in, and I think it's just getting the clarity on that actually.
Can I add just something to add to that, Robert? Which is,
Please.
that if you in an individual, we don't know obviously answering these questions what the individual situation is. If you've got an individual situation where you've got some reason why you need to come out of your agreement or change it because you've had a change in what's going on and you've not been able to do it or whatever, there is a process for that. You need to contact the RPA and say you've had a change of circumstances and let them know. So the part of the rules of SFI are about recognising that things change. Sometimes it's not possible to get your winter cover crop established because it didn't bloody rain last autumn, didn't it? And it's doing the same now. Or it didn't take, or whatever it is that's happened, or you just haven't been able to do the thing that you wanted to do, or whatever. And we have got a process in place for you to make changes to your agreement if that sort of thing happens. So if you've got an individual particular reason to be asking that question that's a bit more complex than just I fancy moving, then for convenience overall, then please do contact RPA, or for any other reason. Like fancying moving is a perfectly reasonable thing to want to do, by the way, just to be clear.
Okay. No, well, that's right, and I think people are now more adept at kind of speaking to you, dropping emails and trying to find out exactly either through ourselves or to you directly. And because without the information, you can't make an informed decision to go forwards. I suppose our last question here is probably because we ask as an organisation to you on a regular basis, what are the latest stats on SFI expressions of interest, applications and the live agreements?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, we've had 13, at the last count, we'd had, I think, 12,000 expressions of interest. So the number of expressions of interest is going up now. I think we had 800 last week. So this normally happens. It normally starts slow and then it ramps up. And we were seeing at our peak with SFI 23, we were seeing about up to 1,000 applications a week. Now, at some point, that's going to slow down because there's only so many farmers, aren't there? So that's not going to go on forever. And that's fine. But at the moment, we're in rapid growth mode with scheme participation. And as I said earlier, we've got half of farmers in schemes now. So we've had about 12,000 people express an interest. We've had about 11,000 of those have been invited to apply so far, and RPA are issuing new invitations all the time. And then we've had about 3,000 applications. And of those, submitted, that is, and then of those we've issued, I think, just over 700 agreements so far.
Okay.
And that's sort of quite normal at this stage. You do tend to see a time lag between people expressing their interest and then actually submitting an application, and that can be quite long because people just want to lodge that they want to do it at some point, but they don't really want to do it until December or something. And as I said earlier, we're speeding up. We will be ready to start speeding up more significantly the pace of turning around applications. And as Jonathan said earlier, that was taking us days on average in SFI 23, and that's what we're looking to get back to. So you can apply, get your agreement, get started the next month for most people. If you're on a common, that is a different process as usual because it's much more complicated. You do need to contact the RPA.
Okay.
And Robert, sorry, just to jump in
Please.
there. On behalf of RPA colleagues, I know that they are still waiting for a small number, but a number nevertheless of SFI 2023 applicants to accept agreements or decline them. So if you are one of those people who got in on the last chance of 23 and maybe you're not wanting to accept that agreement, you're going to start afresh, or it's just sat there and you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do check your inbox because they are desperately trying to get through that work pile. Thank you.
Well, that's great. And I think that's quite a good point to close on, Lynette. As ever, on these popular webinars, we have more questions than we have time to ask. And both Janet and Jonathan have agreed that anything that we didn't get asked this evening can be fired off to them, and they, in a period of time, will come back to us with some answers. So if I didn't get a chance to ask your question this evening, I apologise, but we will get the answers sent back to you. So all it remains for me is to thank our speakers this evening. We have Janet and Jonathan and Lynette, and also I'd like to thank our event sponsors who are Rawthorns, the solicitors, and we'll look forward to everybody joining next time, and that's going to be on Wednesday, the 23rd of October, and that's regarding the HDB making good use of our levy payers' money. And bearing in mind we've got a new chief executive landed into HDB, Graham Wilkinson, who's formerly of Arla, and as a dairy farmer, where I got to meet Graham. So, and he's very much looking forward to how the HDB goes forwards, and meeting the objectives, and also for meeting the requirements of its levy payers. So that will be a Zoom meeting, 7 o'clock on the October, and we look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks for your time.